Happy New Year. Welcome to a football show, Thursday edition. Nick Suss of the Tennessean. I am Braden Gall, of course, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Nick, Happy New Year. How are you, sir?
Happy New Year. I am pretty good. How are you?
Pretty good. Just pretty good?
Yeah.
All right. That's good. I am okay. Mostly because my children have not been in school since December 21st, and they don't go back until January 8th, and I don't know what I'm going to do about it. But that's a problem for just me and my wife to worry about.
And no one else, because nobody else has kids who have not been in school since December 21st.
Well, just people in this area, that's for sure. All right, so lots of stuff to discuss today. Obviously, the Tennessee Titans will play their final game of the season wearing colors that sort of match my Shotgun Willie's barbecue hat, which, of course, he designed on purpose. I'm not kidding about this, because Shotgun Willie's barbecue is the official barbecue of the Houston Oilers. Because he is a Houston Oilers fan, not a Houston Texans fan, and certainly supports the Nashville sports teams, but doesn't love the Titans either. So he thought, you know what? I'm going to support the local team the best way I know how to, which is to put together some merch that looks like the old Houston Oilers gear, which they'll be wearing, of course, on Sunday. We'll discuss what we can actually learn, what we can actually learn from this game about anything. Whether it's the front office, whether it's the ownership group who hasn't spoken yet, whether it's the head coach, the quarterback situation, we're going to, I guess, try to learn some stuff from the show. No Pro Bowl selections. We'll get to that also, if that means anything to anybody out there. It doesn't really mean a lot to me, but we'll see what you think about that, Nick. But we're going to start with college today because it just happened yesterday. So I figured, Happy New Year. Let's talk about the Texas and Arizona State game. Obviously, we're going to have a very strangely timed Georgia-Notre Dame game this afternoon at 3 o'clock Central Time due to the tragedy in New Orleans. On late on New Year's Eve evening and early New Year's Day morning in New Orleans. So we'll get to that here quickly. Sinkers Beverages for all your needs. And, of course, they got a lot of great non-alc options. Of course, that's a big trend, Nick, in January, is folks that they want to clean up a little bit after a week of debauchery. And obviously, if you stop by Sinkers Beverages, they've got a lot of great non-alc options. So go check out their beer. A lot of good beer in there that does not have alcohol in it. So you can still feel like you're having a cocktail, having a cold beer, watching a game, and not really do any damage to your aging body like I did on New Year's Eve. So make sure you go check out Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. I know you and I talked about the first round of the playoffs and how the outcomes and the scores cannot be linked directly to the process that got us the tournament, the bracket, the teams.
Sure.
I still believe that. Obviously, we got an extraordinary football game against Texas and Arizona State, at least an extraordinary second half for sure. And overtime, just incredible drama, the momentum swings. What was your reaction to the first, I guess, 3 playoff games? Penn State dominating largely, Ohio State really dominating, but then Texas and Arizona State playing a fantastic football game.
Yeah, sticking to my pronounced opinion. As long as the teams that I think are better keep winning, good. I'm going to get to see a good semifinal round, and I'm excited about it. Like, that Texas-Arizona State game was capturing 80% of my attention. I was writing articles about the Tennessee Titans while it was happening, so I was technically also thinking about professional football, but that was a heck of a game, a heck of a finish. From everything I've read about it and just watching it, the 4th and 13 throw, the decision that Ewers made, the changes at the line, that's stuff that will go down in Texas history if they continue to win these games. And drawing the next round at the Cotton Bowl is pretty favorable for them. You have to like that. But I mean, my big takeaway is just the steamroller that I thought Ohio State would be dating back to June and July is finally showing up. This feels like one of those years that LeBron, you're like, how are the Cavs the 3 seed? Did they not try during the regular season? And then they show up in the playoffs. Like, oh yeah, they just didn't try in the regular season. Oh, they're just better than everybody now. So it is very intriguing to see that. And I'm glad there was a good game. It's fun when there are good games. But again, as long as we continue advancing towards a national championship game, a national semifinal that has a bunch of teams that feel like they deserve to be there, which I think we're at right now. 3 of the 3 teams that have made it all feel like they have representatively had the kind of seasons that teams that make the Final Four should. And we'll see how. I think both Georgia and Notre Dame fit that bill too.
Yeah, so yeah. I think they do.
Overall pleased.
I think they do. I think the question about Tennessee and Notre Dame and Penn State, all 3 of them, which is the second tier of teams in my opinion, based on the top tier being Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, Georgia. I thought the question about those next three was always going to be is do you guys belong? Like, can you prove that you belong? Tennessee proved it's not quite there yet. Penn State has not yet, I don't think, proven it, but they did their job convincingly in 2 games and have looked very good doing it, albeit I think with an easier path than even Texas got. And I think, Notre Dame, while we can say 40 years of haven't proven it yet, if they win this game, they'll be a 1-loss team with 12 wins, and Georgia will have 3 times. They will have earned it and proven it. So I think you're right to say whatever happens from now on, we've got a 4-team tournament that's worthy. And honestly, what it does is, and I don't love that this is how I feel, because I know you're all in on give me the best of the best in the Final Four and in the championship. What I was so torn on is that what we got in the Texas-Arizona State game was sort of the best version of all of that, which is cult hero Cam Scadaboo doing cult hero things in a cult hero situation that feels like old college football. Arizona State feels like an old college football story to me. It feels like the thing that I watched in the 90s. I know you might be too young for that. But like a team that's got an alumni as a head coach with a player who was overlooked by everybody, didn't get any scholarships, and finally finds his way and does everything, right? Like he's the best player, so you give him the ball at all times to do everything. Like, I'm surprised he wasn't, like, their kicking game is so bad, I'm surprised he's not kicking field goals. So what I think is that but also we got the incredible drama, the comeback, the 2-point conversion, the momentum swings in overtime, but we still got the big boy doing the big boy thing to play in the big boy game next weekend. And that feels insulting to Arizona State because they deserve a high level of congratulations for their season. But Texas, to your point about Ohio State, I think Texas, which could be the lone SEC team left after tonight,
could be.
I went into this round thinking Texas-Ohio State would be a fairly evenly matched game, but I think Texas can win that game. I'm not sure Texas has a chance in this game. And I think I saw a report, 27 draft-eligible prospects are going to be playing in the Texas-Ohio State game.
Sounds about right.
There's going to be a lot of scouts.
Yeah.
in Arlington. And yes, you're right. I talked to Jeff Ketchum of orangebloods.com, long conversation with him on the YouTube page last week going into the game. It's going to be a heavy Texas crowd. No, very few people travel to Atlanta. Almost everybody saved their money for the trip to the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah. I will say this about Cam Scadaboo while we're still on the point. Nobody has ever given me a stronger vibe of Duke basketball player that isn't a Duke basketball player than Cam Scadaboo. And I truly do mean that as a compliment. I am not a Duke basketball basher by any stretch, but just like watching that game, I'm like, this is vintage. You root for him because he knows he's a little bit of the high school bully. Like, he's just a little bit got that bad guy energy, but you're like, yeah, no, he's the good bad guy, right? Like, he's the likable, dislikable guy.
Yeah. They showed his dad, and I was like, does he still have eligibility? Like, he looks like he's about 20. He looks like he's the same age as his son. I don't understand.
But yeah, I mean, the prevailing takeaway right now is just, yeah, the teams that are a little bit better at football are either a little bit better or a lot better at football. And like, that's not denigrating the season that Boise State had. Boise State had a really good season, and they got to the point that they probably should have gotten to. And you can say that about all these teams. And really, I came into this week thinking Georgia-Notre Dame would be the most interesting matchup. So I'm very intrigued to see if that ends up being correct, because I do think those teams fit really well to what they do.
Yeah, and they're very comfortable playing in the type of game that both of them think that they're going to play. I think the question is, are Georgia and Notre Dame going to play the type of game that we all think they're going to try to play, or do they do the different thing that that I know that kind of deal, where like Gunnar Stockton is just empty sets, slinging it all over the place. Like I would not be surprised if they both of them tried different things, because they know what the other one does well, which is run the football, play great defense, quarterbacks that like to run, etc. All right. Quickly here, get to some of your comments. If you want to jump into the comments, please do so. Thumbs up, notifications, rate, review, etc., etc., etc. Matt, Happy New Year's, guys. Happy New Year's, Matt. Eddie, does Shotgun Willie's finally have a team this week? Maybe. Although I'll ask him if he's offended when the Titans wear the colors or not. We'll see. According to Calvin Ridley, they should be the main uniform. Hard agree, Calvin Ridley.
Don't agree.
Oh, we're going to discuss. Ed says, do Ohio State fans deserve to celebrate?
Yeah.
Look, Yes, but I also appreciate taking a shot at Ohio State fans. They're pretty annoying just in general. Love you guys, but like I know a few of you. You're annoying.
College football fans are annoying. That's a feature, not a bug.
Right. It's paid my mortgage for 20 years. Okay. So here we go. Chef ran Ohio State, the $20 million team, of course. 27 draft eligible players, and the best one on the field isn't eligible. That's true.
I can guarantee you. I don't know if you're talking about Arch Manning or Jeremiah Smith, but the answer is Jeremiah Smith.
Well, it depends. Arch could come out in 26, and he could be the number one player in his draft class. Smith could come out the following year and be the number one player in his draft class. So in theory,
Well, whichever one we're talking about, good point.
And for you Titans fans out there, because I was asked this, this is going to be kind of a stream of consciousness program here today. I was asked about this. I think it was on Monday's show or even on Twitter. I can't remember what it was, but like, look, you're going to be picking number 2 right now. That could move. That could change, obviously. But the Titans are probably picking number 2. What would you do with the pick? And I kind of go round and round and round, but like the player who I think might be the number 1 player in the draft class also could be playing in this 4-team tournament, but he's going to be playing for Penn State. Mm-hmm. And Abdul Carter might be the best player in this draft class, and I think he would be a phenomenal selection for the Titans at number 2. I think he's better than Travis Hunter. I've always felt that way. But Luther Burden is the other one that I feel like is a guaranteed surefire contributor to the Tennessee Titans for 10 years. Like, I think Luther Burden's the other one. But
Luther Burden is going to be the fun dividing line of, are you a college football fan or not in this draft class? Because the people who love college football and also love the NFL draft are going to love Luther Burden. And the people who love the NFL draft but aren't necessarily college football fans are not going to love Luther Burden. I agree.
Stephon Diggs. He's Stephon Diggs.
I agree with you that he is a special talent. And what he reminds me of the most is, if you guys jump back probably 12, 13 years ago in the draft, like July, August, Keenan Allen was the number 1 surefire receiver prospect. And then he had a rough last year of college and fell into like the 3rd or 4th round because people were like, oh, the production dipped. But production dips in college receiving is just a silly way to evaluate players, and Keenan Allen's been a regular Pro Bowler for a dozen years. So I very much think
years.
I very much think that
he was a Pro Bowler at age 9.
a dozen is 12.
Well, what is he, like a 21 right now? So
Keenan Allen?
Oh no, I thought you were talking about. For some reason I thought you were talking about Luther Burden.
No.
Anyway, yes, he has. No, you're right, and also 5-star number 1 recruit coming out of high school, Keenan Allen.
Yeah, that's my comparison.
Much like Luther Burden, very different types of players, but very similar career paths. I agree with you. Again, if you put on go watch highlights of Luther Burden and go put on tape of Stephon Diggs, especially in Buffalo or at Minnesota, I think you're going to see both went to both a 5-star recruit that went to sort of a local school that wasn't the big time program. And kind of carve their own path, for lack of a better term. I think Burden and Carter are the 2 that I would be debating between. I think you move down. I think Teron said this on Twitter in a conversation with somebody. You move down from 2 to 4, let's say, and take either of those 2 guys. I think you're in good shape. But keep an eye on Carter. It did look like he banged up his elbow a little bit in that game against Boise State, so we'll see what he looks like. But I imagine they need him. If they're going to beat Georgia or Notre Dame, they're going to need him big time in that game. So keep an eye on Carter.
Yeah, not to jump too far ahead, but either next week or 2 weeks ago, or next week or 2 weeks from now, I will have written my full plan manifesto of how to handle this Titans offseason.
Ooh.
And that is a prominent part. Teron and I have discussed that quite a bit.
A roadmap, huh?
Yeah.
A big old roadmap.
I don't want to do it before the season's over. I don't want to disrespect the fact that we have one very, very important game left.
I'm going to ask you to define.
Mr. Shotgun Willie is going to feel very important. That there are people who very much care about this. Mr. Willie being one of them. But yes, I will define importance as it is not over yet. So we have to talk about what is in front of us.
Well, and Team Ramrod says Carter in the first, Egbuka, of course, the Ohio State receiver in the second. Profit. Here's the thing: I don't think Egbuka is going to be available in the second round. That's just my personal opinion. I think I think he is getting lost. His talent and production and draftability is getting lost in the Jeremiah Smith hype to some degree. Frankly, there are 4 NFL starting offensive weapons on that offense for Ohio State. Judkins and Henderson are going to be playing in the NFL as well. What I think is really interesting, and this is sort of going back to sort of wrapping up the college conversation and looking ahead to maybe what Brian Callahan is trying to accomplish in the final game, what we can actually learn or accomplish. I agree, Sheffran. I think Egbuka's a first-round pick. The thing that we don't remember, or the thing that I think we forget, fans, media, everybody, I think what's interesting is how the Titans have young players that can develop, and we might see some of that in the final game. I don't know if we've seen that yet from Brownlee or Latham. I sometimes the rookie wall kind of forces you to go the other direction when you're young in the NFL, right? Like you can kind of slow down at the end of a season. You haven't played this many games. People catch up on you. There's tape. You got to learn how to be a professional. In college, it's kind of the other way. You almost always get better as the season goes along because you're so young and everybody's so young that what Ohio State emotion and development are much more drastic elements of the game in college than they are in the NFL. And I think you're seeing Ohio State from a motivation standpoint. Like, I'm curious, if Ohio State had beaten Michigan, do you think they're doing what they're doing right now? I think there's a part of that they might, but I don't think they're as dominant and as perfect as they've been against Tennessee and Oregon if they, beat Michigan. I think there's clearly a motivation factor that pissed them off.
Yeah, I think that's a fair thing to bring up. I think that having a catalyst is a really good way to realize your own potential. And it's much easier for a coach to motivate a team that needs motivation than it is to motivate a team that's a well-oiled machine. Like, Ohio State is coming off of one of the most embarrassing losses in modern school history, and they're playing like a team that doesn't want to be embarrassed again. Whereas in the NFL, each loss is to an NFL team. Like, you can't necessarily motivate off of, can you believe we lost this game? Yeah, we lost to a bunch of professionals. Like, that's what happens.
Right. It's the old Nick Saban rat poison thing. Like, you tear your team down when they're getting too much praise.
Yeah.
And when they're not getting enough and when they're down, you defend them to the outwardly to the world, right?
And when they're too high up, you tell them everybody thinks you're going to go 7-5 this year, even though you're projected preseason number 1. Not calling out anybody specific, but let's say that's happened.
Nakobe Dean. We're talking about you specifically, Nakobe Dean. By the way, I would never say that to his face. He's a large man.
I voted for Nakobe Dean, 3rd place for the Heisman Trophy in 2021. I exonerate. I very much like him as a football player.
No, he's a great player. There's no question about it. All right. Well, so do you have any quick thoughts on I'm taking Ohio State over Texas. I'm not even thinking about it. I'm not spending the week to think about it. I'm not going to overanalyze it. I will work hard this week to give you great content about what could lead to a victory for either team, but I will not be not picking Ohio State to win that game against Texas. So
I love things that will make certain people who may or may not be my father go insane. So Ohio State, Penn State, or Ohio State, Notre Dame would be very funny to me. I grew up in SEC country. I went to an SEC school. I've covered the SEC for 10 years. If we get Georgia, Texas, cool. Good job, SEC. You did the thing you always do. But an all Midwest national championship, something about that would be very funny to me.
Well, and no, I agree. The problem is I think Ohio State would destroy Notre Dame or Penn State, and that would be boring.
Wouldn't they right now?
That would be boring. I think Georgia would play them well. I think they would. And Texas might play them well. I don't know. They're just on a mission right now. And I think that's part of why they spent the $20 million in the offseason. It's part of why they came back. And I think the Michigan loss, if you look at the rest of the season, I mean, Ohio State was one of the 1 or 2 best teams in the country. So, like, they were great the whole year. They almost beat Oregon on the road by a 1 play, 1 yard, 1 second.
Yeah.
They handled Penn State with relative ease. They've destroyed it. They've been this team most of the year, I think, despite common opinion here. To your point about the and I don't know, I think we're through the looking glass on the Twitter social media ecosystem now, because I also like to watch the world burn, and watching an Ohio State, Penn State, or Ohio State, Notre Dame, all Big Ten, all Midwest-ish type of final would drive SEC people insane in a way that I would appreciate.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it also creates a permission structure for folks in the Midwest to just be exhaustingly obnoxious.
Yes.
for all the wrong reasons.
I said this to a friend yesterday. I want to give it 3 years before I draw any conclusions about the new playoff structure and how it affects college football. But I do think we are seeing that if you have 2 formats of how to handle your season, under the 4-team playoff and under the 2-team BCS, the SEC's format was objectively and subjectively better. But I wonder for a 12-team format, if the Big Ten way of handling your regular season, if a 9-game conference schedule that is mostly contained to home and away type games, I wonder if that is better for a 12-team, better to get more teams into the 12-team, and better to succeed in the first and second rounds of the 12-team than the SEC, which has almost always been a feast or famine. We have 2 teams that are better than everybody, whereas the Big Ten tends to have 4 or 5 well-spread teams that can advance and conquer. I wonder. I want to see 3 years of evidence to see if it happens, but that is something that I'm batting around.
I think the Big Ten's had an Ohio State problem for a long time.
Yeah,
They don't have an SEC problem; they have an Ohio State problem.
Sure.
But what I do think is, so you're talking about like neutral site games and for.
I'm
like,
just talking. Yeah, just the general way that the SEC has tried to get teams into the playoff versus the way the Big Ten tries to, of how many conference games are you playing? Where are you playing these conference games? What is the value of home field advantage?
Okay.
What is the value of being a top 10 team versus being the number 1 team? Is the conference built around chasing the big dog, or is the conference built around having a big dog, but having 3 or 4 teams that are competing to take that spot? I really don't know if I've formulated a proper opinion yet, but
I mean, I haven't like, if the goal is to like create entertainment for me, I know what my goal would be, which is play more good SEC football games in SEC stadiums. Like that's it. That's Greg Byrne, the athletic director for Alabama, has said as much. If you want to sell more tickets, drive up television ratings, you need more SEC good on good. That's what you need.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that I think the only I'm not saying this is a flaw in your theory, but I think the Big Ten, while they do have a variety of teams that jump up and contend on a given year, the difference being the SEC has like 6 different national champions since 1998, sure. And the Big Ten they got a second one last year with Michigan's first outright title in 50 years. They just don't have the same top tier no matter what we're doing. And I think that's what drives Big Ten people crazy, is that Michigan finally proving it last year over. And, again, they technically I'm okay even saying they, like Washington and Texas, like they didn't have to. They beat Alabama, so that gives them the credit that they deserve. But like I could argue Georgia was the best team, and Michigan didn't play Georgia. So and people that drives Big Ten people insane. So
sure,
I more good football, more good on good, I think is what I want, and I think that's eventually what TV is going to want. And I think that's eventually what the SEC will do. Does that lead to more teams getting in? I really don't want the Big Ten and the SEC to, and we're off too much of a tangent here on college football, but I really don't want the SEC and the Big Ten to start controlling the automatic bids. I don't think we need like 8 automatic bids for the two conferences and then like expand to 14. Look at what's going to happen in this bracket naturally, which is you're going to get 4 teams from the Big Two, and Notre Dame kind of counts. Like Notre Dame walks and talks and acts like a Big Ten or an SEC school. And so and if Georgia wins, you're going to get 4 teams from the Big Two conferences that do control the sport realistically behind the scenes. So we'll see what happens. I think Georgia wins because I think Georgia's built for these moments. Mm-hmm. I think they understand it. I think they're good enough. I think they beat Penn State, and I think they lose to Ohio State. That would be my prediction right now if I had to put it all down on paper. So, all right. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, Sinkers Beverages, making sure this product is free and available for you each and every Monday and Thursday, featuring Nick Suss of the Tennessean. Go sign up, pay for good journalism, and Paul Karski, paulkarski.com. Also sign up and pay for good journalism. 2 of the best Titans writers out there. Cannot be a Titans fan if you're not reading those 2 fellas. So make sure you check out both the Tennessean and paulkarski.com. Okay. What can we accomplish in this game? If you're a Titans fan, is there something like both quarterbacks are going to play? Sounds like the hot hand's just going to kind of get some reps, which is totally fine. I think it's an okay strategy, albeit very unique in the NFL. But I think it's the right strategy. Is there anything you can learn about the quarterbacks in this game? Is it just sort of to get the bad taste of that Cincinnati game out of Will Levis's mouth? And then I still can't believe that the only option for me with Will Levis in the offseason, I know this is going to be in your manifesto, is going to be, trade him or have him compete. Those are the only 2 real options. What can we learn? What can we learn in this game?
I've been thinking about this game in terms of individuals instead of the team. So I could have the number wrong. I'm fairly certain it's 23 of the players on the 53 right now do not have contracts after March 13th. Like, this is an audition game for about half the roster, for about half of the major contributors. And I think it's unfair to frame this game as a, man, you got to go out and win it or lose it based on the Titans' future, when half of these guys have no assurances that they will be Tennessee Titans in the future. So when you're asking about, well, what can we learn? What can be proved? It's much more, to me, for, well, can Will Levis prove that he has the bona fides to be a starting quarterback in the NFL someday? Does Mason Rudolph have the ability to prove that he should either be back here next year or go to a place where he would get an opportunity to compete for a starting job against another youngster? You can go up and down just about every position group on the field. And if Julius Chestnut's playing number one running back, what does he get to prove? Nick Westbrook-Akina, I believe, is a guy on a one-year deal. And Dylan Radins, if he can get healthy and play in this game, he's a guy on a one-year deal. And you go up and down the roster, there's so many guys who, what this game matters is, guys, like, they want to be professional football players. And to view it as, oh, they need to win, oh, they need to lose, is so missing the point of, this team is not going to be this team next year. There are going to be probably 25 to 30 guys back. You're going to have a lot of free agents walk. You're going to have a lot of roster turnover. You're going to have some guys get cut. So to even think of this as, oh, what is this team building for next year? There is no this team next year. There's next year's team. And we'll see what next year's team is on like August 28th. And to think this year's team is next year's team is just fundamentally silly. Yeah, like Jarvis Brownlee's going to be back, but that's not the case for every guaranteed player.
Is it fair to say that Mason Rudolph has probably, like, so there was a time before Rudolph got the start, especially based on how he played for Pittsburgh last year at the end of the year, that you could say to yourself, like, all right, this team might be looking for a veteran to compete in the offseason, right? Mm-hmm. We've had these conversations. You and I have had these conversations. Everybody else has as well. That Rudolph could eventually could have been that guy, but he's probably done enough or been given enough opportunity to prove that maybe he's not. Is that fair to say that he's probably not the competitive veteran that Will Levis is going to be battling with next year? Like does that make sense? Like, I thought at one point, because he played well enough for Pittsburgh down the stretch, like, oh, maybe this could be the answer. You know, he's fairly cheap, very affordable, allows you to invest in other areas. Not going to be great, but like, hey, the guy played well in a playoff game, got the Steelers into the playoffs last year. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I've seen that player so far. I mean, maybe that's part of the system. Maybe it's the offensive line. Maybe it's the, a variety of other options. But it feels like Rudolph, I'm assuming Brian Callahan has sort of made his mind up about whether or not Rudolph is the veteran to compete next year or not. Don't you think?
Yeah. No, that's interesting.
Oh, wow. This doesn't happen often.
I would say that I wasn't listening. No. The thing with Mason is, if it comes back next year and both of these guys are back and there is not a new option brought in, I think that is a really good recipe to set this coaching staff and this front office up to be lame ducks. Now, bringing in another option and it not working is probably an even quicker way to set them up to be lame ducks. But like, you have to have something different. You have to bring in a new factor, whether that is a rookie quarterback or a veteran quarterback. And just by the way that contract dynamics work, it is much easier to foresee Will being back because he has 2 years left on a cheap, flexible rookie deal than it is Mason, who is an impending free agent. Now, if the plan is to trade Will, it makes sense to bring in Mason as on another 1 year deal to be the third stringer until Will gets traded, and then he's your trusty backup. Mm-hmm. But the plan has to still revolve around, there needs to be a third cook added to the kitchen. Now, is that going to be a veteran or a rookie? I don't know. If it is a rookie, I think it is much more likely that Mason returns or they get another veteran somewhere, because you don't necessarily want the rookie to clearly be worse than Will day one. That's just optically not good.
Well, and this is my I don't have a manifesto coming. And Ed asks, does Callahan's system adapt to a quarterback, or does it force the quarterback to adapt? Different question, but he does reference your manifesto. I'm on the Kyle McCord in the 4th round kind of thing now. Like I don't want a quarterback in the 1st round. I think there's options that could develop that you might want to take later in the draft. I know they don't have a lot of 4th, like 3rd, 4th-ish type of picks to like they don't have a lot of value in that area, or maybe not going to have a lot of value in that area, so they need those picks. But I'm a if you're going to go rookie, get a really cheap one and just see if you can find the diamond there. That's where I'm at on this.
I can see that argument. I have always been on the don't overpay for a quarterback when the roster's not ready camp.
Yeah.
So glad that people have started to catch up to me there. Quarterbacks are shiny new toys. Like, it's exciting when you draft one. But if it's Riley Leonard in the 6th round, okay. It's an
I'm good. I'm good with
that is somebody who could be developed into being the Titans version of Jake Browning. I don't know if he'll ever be a starter, but you're adding depth at the position. I don't know what can be learned this game. I want to see how Will bounces back. Like, I do want to see how he responds. He seemed yesterday, talking to him in the locker room, reinvigorated in a way that this could be an FU game from him, of one of those, like, let me just show you what I am kind of games, or it could be exactly what we've seen the other 12 times he's played quarterback this year. Like, I don't know. I do not have the crystal ball, but if he can stay upright, if the Texans rest Hunter and Anderson after the 1st quarter, he could go throw a lot of yards.
Well, and for the record, Paul and I on Mondays have been saying for the entire year, so we're not just now catching up with you, sir, but we've been saying the entire year, don't draft a quarterback.
I said
build the roster.
Broadly, broadly, people are catching up.
A football show has been on top of it. How about that? The entire year. No, but I what happens is to your you do go on this like journey though, like as a fan and as an analyst, you're like, okay, now that they're picking so high, like we didn't expect them to be picking 1 or 2 at this stage of the season with 1 to go. I think most of us thought, I think our predictions are still tagged on Twitter. I think it's like 6, 7-ish wins is kind of, and you and I were on like the bottom end of that spectrum.
I will say, I felt like a complete and utter jagoff that I had the worst predictions of anyone on the beat core coming into this year. And I think I had them at 6 and 11.
6 and 11. Yeah. And everybody, yeah, but like, again, we part of the reason I hadn't seriously considered a quarterback as an option was that I didn't think they would be picking in the top 4 or 5. And now that they're almost assured to be a top 5 pick, which puts them in range, you start thinking about it and you start considering it. You're like, okay, Sanders maybe is the best player at this position. I think he is the only one that I'd be interested in. I've seen some draft scout sources saying that like there's only 1 or 2 that are worth drafting in the 1st round, and many of them are staying away from quarterbacks altogether. I think this is a better class than the Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis draft class. Was Pickett in that class? I think he was. He was the only one taken. Everybody else went in the 3rd round. I think this class is closer to that than I expected, but I don't think it's as bad as that. So I think there are some names that could play. I think, the Carson Becks and Quinn Ewers of the world, like they're not top flight picks, but those are guys that could develop into starting quarterbacks in the NFL. So I've gone on a journey where I was like, no. And then I'm like, all right, if you're going to pick 1 or 2, maybe let's think about it. And now that I've thought about it, I'm back to Abdul Carter, Luther Burden, which is where I was at the beginning of the year. Like, take a pass rusher or a receiver that is a bona fide star in the top 10, build your roster around what the next quarterback is going to be if Will Levis is not the guy, and let's go from there. And it sounds like everybody's kind of coming around on that, I feel like.
I think
to your point. All right. Is there any, I know Paul wrote about this. The Amy Adams Strunk factor in all of this, and the Rand Carthon's factor in all of this, like Jeffrey Simmons was very passionate, I guess you could say, about the tanking thing. Like, I don't want to be a part of that. I'm not a part of that. Get out of here with that. So I think that there's, I think it's the perfect evidence number 1042 that like the NFL players, to your point about 23 of them, these guys don't tank. There's no, if you're on the field, you're playing your hardest. Mason Rudolph's face. I said this on Monday. Mason Rudolph's face after he missed Chig wide open down the sideline to tie the game tells you everything you need to know about Mason Rudolph trying or not. Mm-hmm. And so I think I just think I want to know where ownership in the front office is on this coming out of this game. And we have no idea. Amy's very emotional about the Houston tie and the uniforms and the whole deal. I think it's what broke the back of Mike Vrabel's coaching tenure last year was their loss at home wearing those uniforms to a backup quarterback in a comeback fashion. I think it was an ugly look, and I think it was sort of the straw that broke the back on her decision to get rid of Vrabel. So I'm just curious if there's any extra meeting for the front office in this one. If all the young players look bad, Rand's already sort of, the front office is the one that's getting questions, not the coach, right now. I think the coach is probably back. You have any thoughts on the front office and how Amy views the front office coming out of this game?
To neither
speculatively
to neither defend nor lambast anybody. What I've been thinking about these last couple of days, as I have been writing and pre-writing every single option for what can happen to this team, is that if you look at 2023 versus 2024 and look at the things that fans and media have been critical of this front office for in the last 2 years, you will see a picture where in 2023, almost all of the criticism was about baseline competency. And in 2024, all of the criticism is about hindsight. Of 2023, we were talking about what the heck are you doing with Kevin Byard? And why are you floating these Derrick Henry rumors? And like just baseline, what the heck is going on? Why is this behavior happening? And this year we're like, well, should the Snead trade have happened? Was Calvin Ridley paid too much? Like, these are questions that are like valid about the quality of a GM's decision making, but this isn't baseline competency stuff anymore. It's a different question, and that's kind of what's intriguing me. Not to deflect, but like that's what I'm thinking about when we're talking about Rand and Chad Brinker coming back versus last year when some fair and some unfair criticisms were passed their way just about handling the job, learning how to do the job. If we have graduated from why in the world would you ask your defensive captain to take a pay cut being a main criticism to, oh, was that trade actually what it should have been? We're talking about these guys in the way that you're supposed to talk about general managers, and that some of them are going to make good decisions that backfire. Some of them are going to make bad decisions that work out. There's every version of the Punnett square. That's what I look at, is that this year, I don't think there has been a decision in 2024 that the front office made that I would not consider defensible. Now,
I agree.
Have they worked out? That's where the hindsight questioning comes in.
No. If you're going to rip Rand Carthon for Lloyd Cushenberry, you needed to do it when you signed him.
Yeah,
like you can't do it today because he got hurt.
Yeah, and so that's kind of where I'm at. Of, do I think that all of the moves this front office has made have worked out? No, but do I think that the moves they made were functionally sound to try to make this team better? Sure. There are so many questions about, does what has happened reflect a team that was too gung-ho to bring in talent over fit? Maybe. That's something that we can post-mortem once the season's over and figure out, was the move to add Ridley and Snead and Pollard and Cushenberry reflective of building an offense that fits what Callahan wanted to do? Or was it, let's go get a bunch of toys and figure out how to devise an offense around that? Fair to ask either side of the question. Yeah. But defensible to say, oh, you went out and got the best interior offensive lineman in free agency and the best receiver in free agency and the best cornerback who moved teams this year, and the top 5 running back to move teams this year. That's going to make your offense better. Like that, those are decisions that you would commend a front office for making.
You would think it would make your offense better.
That's the thing, is backfiring doesn't necessarily mean these decisions are bad.
So Derek says needed a veteran coach. Didn't interview Harbaugh. It was down. Jim Harbaugh was never coming here. He was going to the Chargers all along. And I'm not saying that Rand didn't make a phone call or whatever. I'm assuming he did. But all you do is you make the phone call, and if someone says not interested, that's it. It's not Rand's fault or anyone else's fault. I do think here's the thing. This is very similar to the conversation we're having about Barry Trotz, also as a first-time sort of inexperienced general manager for the Nashville Predators, which is individually every decision that's being made is very logical. It's very easy to explain and understand each individual decision that they're making. Barry Trotz did much of the same thing. Had a lot of cap space, had a team that was close, went out and got some guys with a young coach and thought, let's go inject some talent into this roster and compete this year. Largely a similar approach to what Rand Carthon did for the Titans. And taken individually, each of the moves, I completely agree with you. If you're going to tell me, nope, Calvin Ridley was a terrible decision, and judge him for it, you needed to have said it when it happened. I need receipts that show me that you had that opinion at the time, just like signing Steven Stamkos for the Nashville Predators. Like, you have to have said when it happened, I don't like this move. I think it won't work out. You have to do that. But taken in totality with the context of the previous year saying, I don't know about general competency. And when you layer them all together, right, what the difference with Barry Trotz is that Barry Trotz has an overachieving record-setting year last year to go point to and say, look at the job we all did as an organization. And what Rand doesn't have that. He has, in fact, a year in which it adds questions to the decision-making and to the thing. So when taken in context, I agree with your point, but I think it's not a good place to be in when those are the two different evaluations we are doing of the front office.
Sure. No, totally agree. I am very interested to see what all of this means, because for many, many reasons, obviously, but like, this does show a growth trajectory. Now, we're once again back to talking about beneath the surface, which I'm sure people are sick of talking about. But like, what is front office success if it's not beneath the surface success? So I don't know. I really don't know how you evaluate somebody who responded to there was one objective that was given to the front office, and they executed a version of that. Did it work? I think we can all agree right now, not yet. Will it ever work? I don't know. I really, really don't know. But it's going to be really interesting to see what the fallout of this group going out and trying to follow a directive ends up being.
I think Ed says this: playing the patience card is certainly a pivot from the offseason plan. No one will admit that. I will disagree a little bit on that, because I think that's one of the main differences that I just alluded to between the Predators and the Titans, is that the Predators had talent last year. They got to the playoffs. They pushed a team in the playoffs. They had a record-setting scoring team, the highest scoring team in the history of the organization. There was proof of concept with a first-year coach last year that they had something there. I remember a conversation you and I had in camp, like kind of towards the end of camp. So after we had kind of gone through all of our different, I like this player. Oh, this guy's pretty good. Oh, keep an eye on that guy. And we love our undrafted free agent stories, and we like all these different things and I remember having a conversation, and we were just looking at each other going like, there's no depth on this team. There's no backup plan for almost any of these positions, whether it's offensive line or corner or receiver. Like, they didn't the talent wasn't there on this team last year, and it's not there this year.
Yeah.
I totally disagree with the pivot thing. I think patience was absolutely, going back to our preseason predictions, I had him at 7 wins. That's not good. No, you had him at 6, which is worse.
To the point that is being made, was that Ed who said that? Yeah. To the point that's being made, if you come out and say that last season was unacceptable, and you come out and say that you've checked every box, and you come out and say that the goal for this year is to be competitive and to contend, patience was not publicly preached. There is an understanding that patience should be had. But when the messaging from all 3 prongs of the team, from the coach, from the GM, and from the one statement from the owner, all indicates that losing will not be tolerated. Nobody's out here saying, well, we're going to lose for a little bit. People are saying, no, we went out and spent all this money to win.
Yeah, you can't
but if they came out and said, hey, this is going to be a rebuild, give it a year, I don't think the vitriol would be as high right now, because I think people would have heard, oh, this is going to take time. But that was never preached. It was inferred, but it was never preached.
Let me ask you, you're saying, like, let's deal with the headache in the short term, because you know that Twitter is going to devolve into the worst possible version of the discussion. Mm-hmm. So what's going to happen on Sports Talk Radio and on Twitter, which is going to be the worst version of this all, is going to be, how could you say that? This is your first year coach. You finally have you went up and traded for Will Levis, and he's back, and you've got a coach, an offensive mind, and now it's the time. You've invested in, whatever, how many millions of dollars of guaranteed money, like $180 million in guaranteed money, especially on the offense around the quarterback. You drafted a top 10 pick around the quarterback. Mm-hmm. You would have taken you're saying the short-term overreaction to that message in August would have been worth some of the patience today, is what you're saying. Is the
I
trade
am saying,
because you're going to get outrage at some point of
Yeah.
the year, no matter what.
and I am saying that it is almost always better as a PR situation to
Do it on the
undersell and over-deliver than it is to oversell and under-deliver.
Yeah, no argument there. No argument there.
Like,
do you think there's any changes in the offseason to the front office and I think let's go with the top 3 on the coaching staff. I definitely think there's changes below the top 3 on the coaching staff, obviously. But if you look at Holes, Wilson, Callahan, and then let's call it Brinker and Carthon, I'm not so sure there's any changes, but I don't know. We'll see.
I can't say I'm savvy enough to know everything, but I am savvy enough to say I don't know when I don't know. I don't know. I don't know yet.
Have a take. Have a take. That's what you're supposed to. You're supposed to have fiery hot takes on podcasts.
I am beat writer. I write beat. I will tell you what I know when I know it.
All right, fair enough. But you can opine on the college game, right? I can have you opine. Okay, good.
I am opining constantly
about Michael Williams and Gunnar Stockton. There you go.
Sure. If you want Trayvon Walker, go get Trayvon Walker 2.0. Nothing bad about that.
Yeah, well, they got another guy on the other side that's pretty good on the defense as well. Derek Williams says, rookie head coach, rookie DC, rookie OC need more experience in the coaching tree. There were times this year when Brian was swayed in critical situations by the crowd. I don't know if it's by the crowd. Derek, I agree with your basic point of this comment. But I don't know if the crowd. I think he made a couple of small mistakes with like a timeout after not challenging. I can't remember when that game was where they were like like on the opponent's 42, and he didn't know if he was going to go for it or not, and he took a timeout. You remember that moment? I can't. Yeah. There's been some of those types of things where Vrabel never had that because he was an experienced guy, but I think that's part of it, though.
He wasn't until he was. Like,
that's what I mean. That's what I mean.
If you're limiting your search, and this isn't a criticism of you, Derek. This is a criticism of like general logical discussions of sports. If you're limiting your search to people who have done it before, you're limiting it to 2 very specific options: the very old and the failures. Because there's nobody who's on the market who is, I was very successful at this and I have done it before, because those guys get hired immediately. And this year, like, I've gone through this. Who are going to be the best options for people who have done it before?
Pete Carroll.
Among head coaches. You have Pete Carroll, who is, 72, 73 years old? Maybe beyond that, who you'd be hiring for 2 to 3 years to be a bridge.
Doesn't look like a day over 61.
You have Vrabel, who the Titans are not going to rehire. And then you would have Cliff Kingsbury, and you would have Arthur Smith, and you would have Anthony Lynn, and you would have Brian Flores, and you have guys who have clearly done it, but to varying degrees of non-success. I think Flores has a career-winning record, but obviously was left out in disgrace in a way because of the scandals that were happening around him in Miami.
I would hire Brian Flores in 2 seconds.
I agree that he's a very good coach, but you have to take into account that there's a reason that he hasn't gotten another opportunity yet.
Sure.
And I don't know. This is not to rant that you should always hire a new guy. I think there's a lot of good reasons to hire a guy with experience. But like, if let's say it's Anthony Lynn, that's just a generic former head coach to talk about. He's doing wonders in Washington right now as a running game coordinator. He was in San Francisco for a few years. His rehab tour has been really impressive. He went to the playoffs once or twice with the Chargers. He's a guy who has an offensive pedigree. All of this is a good reason to talk to yourself into, hire this guy. And then you remember, he got fired. Like, he's a guy who got fired because his team wasn't good enough. And that's what almost every single one of these people is going to end up being, with the exception of Carroll, who didn't technically get fired. He got Jay Leno'd out of town.
Well, he might be done.
Situation. He might be.
And if let's just remove him because he's won a Super Bowl and he's a great coach. Like, let's just take him out of it. Because there's a chance that he's just like sitting on a porch overlooking the Pacific Ocean somewhere every day. I think it is hysterical that Mike Vrabel is clearly the best coaching candidate available. Like, just to me, I think he's clearly number 1. I would have Flores at number 2, and I'm not sure I like anybody else after that in the NFL ranks. Could there be I don't think Lane Kiffin and Brian Kelly and I don't think any of these guys in the college game are going to be as attractive as people think they are, or as maybe they think they are. to the NFL.
Marcus Freeman, maybe.
I agree. It's the name I thought too. That's
Yeah.
the name I thought too. That guy is a very extremely organized, attention to detail, polished CEO leader already. And that's why he got the Notre Dame job as such a young player, such a young coach. So we shall see. Otherwise, I'm not even going to ask you about a prediction. I think it's very obvious. Winning helps players keep jobs, earn playing time. I think somebody in the comments said something about watch the inside linebackers. They only got, the Williams, Gray, Harrell rookie trio got 4 total snaps last week. I don't know why you don't play them more in general. Let's see some more of those guys as well. But basically this is, if you lose, fine. You might have a really, really great asset in a 1 or a 2 pick in the draft. If you win, you beat Houston, you knock them down a peg, you make Amy happy. Maybe some young players develop. Who knows? So we'll see what happens. No Pro Bowlers. You okay with that? I know there's four alternates, but you okay with that?
I would think Nick Folk probably got snubbed, but beyond that, totally understand. I would say Amani is my second place. He had a really good year. Would be cool to see him be rewarded because I don't think he's ever made a Pro Bowl before. But generally, I think that's totally fair.
Good guy, smart player, been around a while, been through a lot of stuff with different coaches and different regimes. Hooker's, I think he did have his best season this year. So
I'd like to see him rewarded at some point.
Yeah, I'm down with that. Otherwise, make sure you check out Nick at the Tennessean.
Do you want to do uniforms real quick?
Oh yeah. Let's hang on. Derek says John Gruden. I've had 3 different people, Nick, text me. I heard John Gruden's name mentioned. I'm like, guys, I'm not picking on you again, Derek, but John Gruden is not a good football coach. I don't know why this is hard to understand. He's okay. He was okay in 2002. He has not been a good football coach in a long time. He's not going to win at University of Tennessee, and I don't think he is a good football coach in 2024. Am I wrong on this?
I would agree that he is a little bit past his prime. I think that there was a time when he was a very good football coach, and I think the league has caught up to it.
And that was over 20 years ago. Anyway,
correct.
All right, I think they're the best uniforms that the entire organization has ever worn. Excuse me. So that's my opinion. I think the old Derek is one of the greatest logos in the NFL history. I think the color scheme is great. I love everything about it. Why are you a hater?
What year were you 9 years old?
I don't want to admit this, but 1991.
Okay. I think that when you are roughly between the ages of 8 and 12 is when your uniform opinions get imprinted on your soul, and things that you thought were cool in your late elementary school to preteen days are probably the uniforms you're always going to think are cool for the rest of time. And it just so happens that the people who are the most valuable for advertising purchasing power these days are people who were 8 to 12 years old around the time you were. So we're seeing a lot of nostalgia for uniforms of the 90s. And we're seeing it, oh yeah, these are gorgeous. These are awesome uniforms. Let's go back to that. It's just that people in their late 30s and early 40s right now are the ones who have the expendable income, who want to make things look like they did when they were happy, when they were teenagers, when Bill Clinton was playing saxophone. It's a different thing. I know I've made 2 late night television references in 4 minutes. I'm sorry, but I just finished reading a book about it. I don't know. They're cool, but you are not the Houston Oilers. There is no reason for the Tennessee Titans to be the Houston Oilers. That is past branding. It is fine to do a throwback, but to make that branding your primary branding is dumb. Because there is a full generation. There is close to 2 full generations of people who are Tennessee Titans fans because they've only ever known the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans have been around for 25, 26 years now. There are parents who are giving birth to kids that they were Tennessee Titans fans without ever knowing the Houston Oilers, and now their kids are going to be Tennessee Titans fans without ever knowing the Houston Oilers. And to pretend that this nostalgia for a thing that's 31 years old is valid. No, it's nostalgia. Move on, have new branding. Don't pretend you were something that you were in the past, especially when that something didn't win Super Bowls. It's not like this thing that the NFL needs to be oh, hell yeah, the 1989 Columbia Blues. Those teams were good to average. You're being nostalgic for a thing that is just pure nostalgia bait. And that's fine. But that's not what branding should be. You should always think to the future. Build forward. Don't look backwards.
I have so much to say here. I think there are some kernels of truth in some of your theories here. Yes, late 30s, early 40s has more disposable income, but that's not who's deciding what's cool. The people who decide what's cool are in their early 20s right now. Have you seen the way they all dress? It's all the 90s. So that's the young people. But no, hang on. No, I gave you
Y2K.
I gave you some opportunity here. Number one, I have not connected to the Titans or the Oilers brand in any personal way. So there's no nostalgic for me. I worked for a magazine, Athlon Sports. I still do for almost 20 years. I am a graphic design nerd. And the color scheme and the graphic design work of the Oilers uniforms and tones and colors and logos is objectively better than a flaming thumbtack that has a couple stars in it. It's just objectively better. Now, here's the other thing. There's so much uniform stuff from the 90s in that era that I would be impressionable that I think is terrible.
Sure.
I think the New York Jets uniforms of the 90s, atrocious with the straight line. Go back to the circle from the 60s. I don't like the straight line in the 90s. I don't like the Giants uniforms from the 90s, just the big old Giants on the side of the helmet. I like the NY better. I like older logos because I think the graphic design was better. The Broncos uniforms, when they changed to the piping and the Miami Hurricanes things, you know what I'm saying? When they all went to the piping here and all the extra colors and stuff, like I think it looks bad. I don't think it looks good. And that's all very 90s, early 2000s. How about this for a modern twist? The Oregon Ducks uniforms last night. Pick an era. Like the Oregon Ducks, like they had, I love the old green and yellow that they wore on their jerseys, but they never wear it with the modern flashy helmet. You've mixed eras in yesterday. I think they lost because of this, frankly, Nick. And like if you're going to wear the metallic chrome helmet, do something modern and edgy and metallic, and they look great when they do the modern edgy thing too. But when they go old and nostalgic, I like that also, but it's because it's very distinct. Both of them are different, right?
Let me grab a prop. I'll be back in 6 seconds.
Yesterday, I'll just keep talking. Yesterday, the Oregon Ducks cross-pollinated their uniforms. And the uniforms look terrible, in my opinion, because they cross-pollinated. It was about 5. It was very fast. Yeah. So you could have gotten pressure on Will Levis in that amount of time.
Yeah, that was quick. I just happened to have a figurine of an old Steve McNair from the era that I was about 9 years old in. Like, I don't understand why this is any better or worse than the ones you're talking about.
It's like, so much worse.
This is a fine uniform. This is a uniform that I am totally okay with teams wearing. Just like the Columbia Blues is a uniform I am totally okay with people wearing. Just advance it. Always be looking forward for new ways to brand your team. Don't brand your team based off of what it was 30 years ago.
Okay, then I thought their adjustment a couple years ago was fantastic. I think their tweaks to the uniform was great. I think it was a great step by them. I think it is too Arena Football League. Now, I agree with you. You don't have to go back and just call yourselves the Tennessee Oilers and just do that. I think you can make it look forward. And make it look. I think it's an objectively bad logo and uniform based on the league itself as a whole. I'm not trying to insult all Tennessee Titans fans, but that's an opinion I've had since 1999 when I was an impressionable young person that thought this is kind of ridiculous looking. So I just, it's 2024. I think you're right. We can look forward and also tie in some nostalgia with the color palette if we want to do that. So I think they made some good tweaks. A few years ago. I think there's another one coming in a couple years. Here's the last note on this. You are 1,000,000% correct, though, Nick, and that they will never, ever go back to becoming the Oilers. They're never going to go back to it's never going to become full-time. It's always going to be a nostalgia throwback moment. It's never going to be,
which is good.
It's never going to be changed. I just agree with Calvin Ridley. So It looks good. It looks good. That's all. All right. Tennessean.com. Obviously, please check out Sinkers Beverages as well as Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. All of you in the comment section, thank you so much for hanging out. Please rate, review, subscribe, thumbs up, notifications, all that good stuff. We do appreciate you guys. Hope everybody has a great start to 2025. We'll see you on Sunday at Nissan Stadium for the season finale and what will be the end of Brian Callahan's first season, mercifully. Thanks, Nick. Always good to see you. My name's Braden. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.